Now that we added our styling in our navigation bar, let's work on the pages. Let's maybe start with the all meetups page and let's output a list of dummy meetups for the moment before we then make sure that we can add our own meetups. Now for this, I'll go to the all meetups.js file, and the goal in there is to get a list of meetups. Later, we will get it from a server by sending a HTTP request. For the moment, we'll work with some dummy meetups. And I then want to output those meetups. Now for this, I'll first of all add a constant named dummy data, which we'll replace later, which holds an array of dummy meetups. Now here I'll just add a bunch of JavaScript objects which hold the meetup data. Things like the image, the title, the description text, and the address maybe. And for this, you can definitely also use my code attachments. There you'll find some prepared dummy data. You can also prepare your own one. Here I just have two dummy objects, which have basically the same content, just different IDs and different titles, but the same image, the same address, the same description text, because of course it's not about the dummy data, but about what we do with it. Now, one word about that image. I got that from Wikipedia. You can, of course, bring your own images. Here I got this nice looking image here, created by Thomas Wolf and not by me. So just to give him due credits. And you can, of course, bring your own image. Just make sure that you simply get a URL to some image and store that in this image property of your dummy data points. Now we got the dummy data. Now the goal is to output that data. So for this here in this div or a section, which we could also use, we can add a h1 tag, let's say, and say all meetups. And then below that, we want to output this data, but of course not as code like this, but instead as JSX elements. And for this, we now need to learn how we can render a list of JSX elements dynamically, how we can translate a list of data into a list of JSX elements. Because it is worth noting that in JSX, you can actually render an array of JSX elements like this. So output a dynamic expression with curly braces, then add an array, and in there you could have list items like item 1, and then as a second item, item 2. And if you do that, those are rendered. So arrays are rendered correctly, automatically by React. And that's important to know, because that means that if we can translate this array of objects into an array of JSX elements, we can output it down there. And there is a way for translating an array into an array of different data in JavaScript. On that dummy data array, we can call the built-in map method, which exists in JavaScript. And map allows us to execute a function. Here I'm writing an arrow function on every element in that array, and it will get this element as an input. So in this case, the meetup, let's say, as an input automatically, because this function is called automatically by JavaScript. And we then return the transformed data. And the result of calling map then is a new array full of that transformed data. And here we could say for every meetup object which we're getting, we want to return a list item. And hence we maybe actually wrap this all here with an unordered list. And in that list item, we want to output data about that meetup. For example, to begin with, to output the title. So here I'm dynamically outputting meetup title in this JSX code. So with that, we transform our array of objects into an array of li elements. And if we do that just like this, and we reload, we see this is a first and this is a second meetup. So that does work. Now there is one important note about lists though. If you open the developer tools, you'll see a warning here that each child in a list should have a unique key prop. That is a requirement by React, which it needs to update and render lists efficiently. I dive deeper into that in my React course. For the moment, it's enough to know that we should add the key prop here to the list item and then set this to some unique value per item. And we have a unique value for every list item here, the IDs. The IDs are different for every item. So here we can then set this to meetup.id. And with that, we'll no longer get that warning if we reload. So that is how we can render a list of data, simply by mapping it. And that is how you typically do render lists of data with React. But in the end, you can just render any array of JSX elements, no matter how you derived that array.